Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's edition of re249, where I take old stories I've narrated and update into modern audio standards. This particular story is called How to Die, written by Regal Legal Eagle. I looked around my apartment once more and petted my pockets, even though I knew I already had everything. I can never break the habit. The little colourful Christmas lights I had strung in the windows provided a nice contrast to the otherwise dreary nature of my home. Of course, they weren't much, just little strings of multicoloured LEDs. I'd had a kid down the street make them for me in exchange for a real honest-to-God burger. Though don't ask me what the meat was, because I have no idea. Tasted mostly like cow, though, I think. From what I remember, at least. As the lights flickered a bit, I could hear the muffled rain outside, the streaks of water illuminated by the gold light from the light post outside. I needed to go. Even though I hadn't cooked for hours, I checked the stove to make sure that it was, and then walked by my table on the way to the door, giving my cat a drive-by head rub as I passed. He meowed a little and tried to pretend like he was starving despite the fact I fed him a little while ago. He paused and scratched his chin for a moment before putting away. Cindy across the street had a copy of my key, just in case. Before I stepped out of the prefab, I pulled the hood up on my jacket, stepping out into the light rain before turning the lock on the door behind me. On days like this, I couldn't help but wonder, was I going to be coming back? I could never say yes with certainty. All I could say was, maybe. If I was in a good mood, I'd say, hopefully, but today all I could muster was, I don't know. I began to walk towards the market then. In the rain, even a light one like this, people had their hoods up and umbrellas out as they moved. What few people were out at this hour, at least. No idle chatter, no casual stroll. They were headed somewhere. Some carried groceries, some carried parcels. Most carried nothing. The rain provided a measure of quiet, despite the decent flow of people walking through the area. No one was talking, and our movements were muffled by the falling rain, though the lights still flickered around us. Christmas lights, shop signs, and ads such as there could be any. Even in these difficult times, we always seemed to make things as flashy as we could. Once I reached the edge of the market, I paused to take it in. This was where the human sector mixed with the other refugees out here. The signs were just as flashy, but now they were in all manner of language I didn't understand, including the Japanese and Chinese ones. Some lucky humans had set up restaurants and little shops around here to get what money they could from more fortunate species in the Alliance, who deigned to venture this far out from the center and shop with us less fortunate souls. Most of us, however, scraped by in the vast scrap fields to the south, or on one of the agri-barges out in the bay. Tough work, either way. Sometimes I figured I'd had it easy with my job, or easier, maybe. I couldn't see myself waking up at 5 every morning and working my ass off all day just to make enough to survive and little else. Maybe I was lazy. Maybe I just didn't have the work ethic. Either way, I headed a little deeper into the market and stopped before a tea house of sorts. To contrast the soft gold lights outside and the dark, cloud-filled skies, the fluorescent insides were bright, almost painfully so to me. The chairs and tables, a dozen bright colors and different styles. People made do with what they could scrounge after all. At this time of night, there weren't many people inside, which made things easier for me. I knew she'd be in there, one of the few species to have it as bad, if not worse than us. Sci-FI. Our creation, one of our final gifts to the galaxy, and one of our final weapons in the futile war. I studied her like I had for a dozen nights now. Rounded ears atop her head, short snout, grayish-blue fur, with darker spots here and there, feline-shaped eyes with yellow iris, long tail wrapped around the base of her chair, and her legs, humanoid-shaped other than that. They might have evolved differently on their own over time, but since we had a hand in shaping them, of course, we made them in our own image. It wasn't normally a good idea to stare at a person of her profession like this out in the open. I'd been careful about it in the past, but tonight it didn't matter. I stood there before the open shop floor in the light rain and watched her. Her movements were careful and precise as she sipped from her teacup. Her suit was immaculate, nicer than anything I had, certainly. It wasn't black like I used to think. Some sort of deep blue, offset by a grey shirt underneath and a bright red tie. I couldn't figure the tie at first. Why wear a noose round your neck, especially in our line of work? But it seemed to be part of her thing. She certainly had a sense of style. When she finally looked at me, I locked eyes with her and waited to see if there was any sort of reaction. When she casually tilted her head and then took another sip of her tea, I realized that maybe I hadn't been as careful as I thought. She knew me as I knew her. She then inclined her head gently to the seat across from her, and I stepped out from the rain, squinting a bit as I stepped into the bright lights of the little tea house. As I approached, I could see her sword carefully leaning against the side of a table, but she pulled it under her lap then, keeping it closer still. When I'd first heard she used a sword, I'd laughed and figured she was likely just arrogant and overconfident then. But when I'd seen her in work, I changed my mind. I still thought it was a bit much, but obviously she cared more about her style than I did. I pulled a chair across from her out, and then sat down, reaching up to tug my hood back and run a hand through my hair for a moment. We sat staring at each other across the little table for a full minute of silence before she finally spoke. "Tea?" she asked, and motioned to the other teacup on the table. She really had expected me. Could be good, could be bad. "No thanks. Never really acquired the taste for green tea," I replied then, keeping my hands in my pockets. But after a moment I realized that was rude and pulled them out, setting them on the table. It was a gesture, and she saw that. Her other hand came up from the blade on her lap to make it clear she understood. Neither one of us wanted to bust up the tea house. Neither of us had any reason to want to ruin someone's business. "Got tired of being a voyeur?" she asked then, and I snorted softly as I looked into her eyes. They weren't yellow, like I'd thought. The irises were gold. They seemed to shimmer a little as she stared at me. I could see why someone might get lost in them. I knew I should focus, but I felt confident she wouldn't strike me just yet. I let myself enjoy this moment a little longer before finally nodding. "Deadline," I replied, and she nodded in a knowing fashion. "So then why exactly have you waited so long?" she asked, and I thought it over again. I sort of figured that what I would say earlier, but I still took time to consider my words. "I'm unsure I want the contract," I finally explained. She narrowed her eyes for a moment, looking slightly confused as she tilted her head. "Is it wise for someone in our line of work to be picky, or at least to take a contract without knowing if they intend to fulfill it? It seems unprofessional." I smirked and chuckled at her words, which made her frown. "I don't know what's what until they give me the contract. I don't get a chance to see my target at times until I'm upon them. The only reason I know what you look like is they wanted me to be sure it was you. Gave me a picture and everything. Rare for me," I confessed. She slowly nodded. "That would explain your, tactics." She filled the word with such disdain that I couldn't help but laugh once more, which caused her to glare at me. "You think this is amusing? How you survive any contract seems a wonder to me, though the regularity with which you are supposed to do so startles me. I'm not inclined to underestimate people, but with you it almost seems like your reputation warrants me to overestimate." I shrugged then. Seemed like she'd followed me a few times and I hadn't noticed. Better than I thought. Or maybe I was worse than I figured. Either way, it didn't matter. "I'm good at improvising. It's a human thing. We're known for it." "Why is it that you all think that you're so special in that regard?" she asked then, eyes narrowing a little as she seemed curious. "All my own professional traits I learned from one of your kind. A human. She was meticulous and precise. Good traits for anyone. Then on an improvisation side, you act like you're the only ones who can manage it." I thought it over and scratched my chin idly as I said, "I don't know, I suppose, because we do it more than most. Yes, we can be very meticulous and precise and careful and all that, but we're also prone to toss caution to the wind and just go for it. I suppose we're known more for what we're exceptional at, for what makes us stand out compared to the others." I shrugged at the end and then continued. "I don't think I'm going to try and fulfill the contract," I confessed, with which made her frown. "It's unprofessional," she chided. "I don't really care." I opened my mouth to say more, to explain how this was a job to me, how I didn't really enjoy the main aspect of it, how I used it to my advantage anyway. But then I just took a deep breath and shrugged. "Doesn't feel right, doesn't feel right," she echoed. Then, as she arched a brow, "Why keep balance around here?" I said then. And the way I see it, you do too. Neither one of us takes this personally, I assume. I ventured, and she nodded. We're both professionals, even if you're more professional than me. I smirked as she glared a bit, and then continued. So we both keep balance in a way. Someone gets too big, too strong, and or too dangerous. And that means someone will want one of us to even the odds. Lord knows the cops won't. Not this far out. And humans don't really have their own, organizations yet to help even the odds. So I figure, if I get paid to kill aliens to keep the peace and keep the human sector a bit safer, then so be it. Xenos, she corrected, and I shrugged. I knew the argument over the word choice. Not our planets, blah, blah, blah. She knew what I meant. It also doesn't make sense to me, I went on. Who orders a hit on a hitter? A professional, at least. It's not like anyone should have a grudge against you, right? You never been a passionate one, have you? I trailed off as she frowned, and then I realized what I was getting at, and shook her head. No passion killings. Professional only, never anything personal. I thought about her for a bit. The person who trained you, she's not still around. No grudge against what took her? I asked, and it was her turn to smirk. The expression didn't quite fit on that face due to her snout, but they'd learned quite a bit of facial quirks from us, and so she was stuck with it. Can't assassinate cancer, she informed me, and I nodded. Guess that makes sense. If anything, I'd figure it would go the other way, that someone might order a hit on me, I confessed, which made her frown. Why, you're a professional as well. As she said it, I smiled, and she frowned a little deeper. Right, I mentioned that I keep balance. I figured if various gangs and organizations around here are fairly close in power, then no one will try anything open and stupid, like a turf war, which could get a lot of humans killed, not to mention all the other Xenos, I caught myself. So if someone like me, who's very distinct, shows up and clears a place out, what are people going to think? I mean, if one faction gets too strong, the others would chip in to hire me, and then turn on each other since they don't have a common enemy anymore. She snorted at that. The common enemy? She let the phrase hang there for a moment, and I nodded. The autocracy, surely a common enemy to all others out there. And yet, when they'd struck at us, we found help so hard to find. Fear hit them harder than we thought. That's when the humans discovered their rather unique ability amongst other sentient species. It's why the autocracy invaded before we could get too strong. It wasn't until the end that the alliance finally formed, emboldened by our success, such as it was in the war. We made them think they could win, but by then it was too late for us. Earth, our colonies, all of it was gone. A species of nearly pre-sentient aliens, Xenos, on a fairly Earth-like world, the Sci-FI. In times of peace, I doubt we'd have meddled with it, but in a time of war, we needed allies. We needed soldiers. We needed fighters, and they could fight like us. The cunning of a cat, the loyalty of a dog, the ferocity of a wolf, and the fighting spirit of a man, I said, and she snorted at the old description of a people. It's bullshit, you know. Some of us are dumb, some aren't loyal, and some are quite shy and timid. We do have your fighting spirit, though, she conceded. I couldn't help myself as I asked, Do you hate us? Who? She asked, and glanced around the tea house for a moment, as if to check that I had an associate sneaking up on her. No, I mean us humans, I clarified, as she looked back at me. All of you? I've only met a small number of you on a personal level, she informed me, and I shook my head. I don't mean like personally. You know what I mean. Oh, but I do mean personally. In our line of work, you can't afford to hate anyone. At least, I think so. It makes you sloppy, less focused, less in control if you let your emotion into it. But besides that, are you a genetic engineer? She asked, and I shook my head, even though she knew the answer. A general, a leader, someone who made the choice to uplift my people? You know I'm not, I frowned, as she just shook her head. Then why would I hate you? As she asked that, I slowly shrugged. I don't know. I thought maybe you'd hate us for bringing you into a war we were losing, to take you away from your homeland, which is now occupied, to turn you into soldiers and killers without a choice. Her laugh made me blink, not the reaction I'd expected. Is that what you think? She asked. If you hadn't uplifted us, and I'd been born there, I'd be lucky if I figured out how to ever fasten a sharp rock to a stick, and fire would be a great mystery to me. You think that we hold a grudge against you for losing our home, Before missing out on thousands, hundreds of thousands of years of hardship and dying at the age of 30 for a few years of war, and now a peace of sorts on the other distant worlds. A life as a refugee now is better than whatever I possibly could have lived back there in the dirt and squalor of pre-civilized life. But what about all you've lost? I asked then. How many of you died in the war? There are more of us now than there ever were on our homeworld, she said, and shook her head. You think of us as some spread-out species across the planet. We had spread across the continent and a half. 2, if I'm feeling generous. We were in tribes that fought constantly over hunting grounds and groves of trees that could bear fruit. We didn't even know how to farm. When we were bred and trained, we wanted to fight. You know they gave us a choice, right? I shook my head. I didn't know that. We were explained the situation and given a choice to fight or not. We chose to fight. We are like you. We know how to fight. We knew what to fight for. Most importantly, we know how to die. I nodded at that slowly and let out a breath. We know how to die. A very human phrase. It doesn't translate well into other species. It's a human thing. Well, a human in Caliphate. I'm still not sure how much of it was them and how much of it was us. It's a hard concept even for us, I admitted. Of course, out of all the species, there were only the 2 who seemed to have any luck in mastering it at all. She nodded before we sat there in quiet once again. She slowly sipped her tea, and I simply took the time to think. So, do you not wish to try and fulfill the contract because a debt you feel for me? Guilt? She asked, and I shook my head. It might be why I hesitated at the start and watched you. But I'm glad I did, because now I know I don't want to, I explained. Just because we know how to die doesn't mean that we should seek it out. She nodded at that. It's why I don't take contracts in other professionals. There is no sense to it. I thought that over and tilted my head. Were you offered a contract on me? I asked, and she thought it over. I might have been. I never even saw the picture. I said no professionals. That made me frown. Wait. If you were even approached with a contract for a professional in these areas, and I was given you, someone wants us to kill each other. Her free hand moved to her sword, and my hands moved back into my jacket pockets as I began to look around. Just outside the awning of the little tea house, I could see the figures in the rain. I'd been so focused on her that I ignored my surroundings. We both stood then as they moved in on either side of the open structure. A few other patrons quickly scurried away, and I saw the old woman who'd been at the cash register duck into the kitchen. Well, I had hopes. I informed my superiors. The idea wouldn't work. I examined the speaker, a Gred rock crusher. For a species with rock crusher in their name, it certainly looked the part. Over 2 meters tall, hands bigger than my head. I examined the others who were with him, Calisan, Tripinal, and a few Nerlik. No humans, no Caliphate. Most of us who could fight were elsewhere, being of use to the Alliance somewhere. The war had taken its toll on those of us who could fight. Most of the refugees were those who'd been too old, too young, or too sick to fight. There were a couple exceptions, like me, and my new friend here. I'm sure in time we'd form our own gangs and organizations to fill the void. We were great at fighting, after all. But until then, rather ironically, we gave the other refugee species their own common enemy. I figured it was only a matter of time before they ganged up on us, realizing the threat that we might soon be to them. While trying to make a common enemy out of the autocracy, our poor and our weak had become a common enemy for the criminals of our new homes. The irony wasn't lost to me. So you wanted us to kill each other? I asked. That was the plan, the Gren replied. He had a slight accent, but a nice one. He sounded fairly eloquent for someone so large and hulking. The 2 of you have been busy around here. You've done some good work, for us and for others. But now that we're forming a large concern, we need to make sure there's no one around to challenge it. And seeing as we're not inclined to allow humans or Caliphate into our organizations, you 2 posed a problem. Posed? She asked next to me, noticing the past tense. We've dealt with killers before. You're good, but you're no different, and we outnumber you, the Gren mentioned. That was the key, I knew. They didn't have us quite surrounded. That's typically how the aliens fought. Give their enemy a way to escape, and they'll take it when the fight goes south. But he didn't understand us, what made us so dangerous. I figured I'd knighted him. You think we'll just run off and leave our people behind? To leave them to get bullied by the likes of you? I asked them. Ah, there it is. The human, of course, has to make things difficult. We'll beat you if you like, kill you if we have to. After all, you and your pet there know how to die, don't you? The other aliens chuckled as he said that. I'd heard it before. They mocked us for it. What sort of phrase is that? Who needs to know how to die? So I said what they were thinking. It's an odd phrase, isn't it? Know how to die. Who needs to know? It isn't complicated. Disease, accidents, combat. There are a great many ways we can die. We're just as fragile as anyone else. More fragile than some, I smirked. But all of you have a weakness in you. Fight or flight, we call it. Those ancient primal instincts have their own claws sunk deep into you. If you fight, it's because you think you can win. And when it's lost, you run. So long as you have other options. Just like any animal, you're most dangerous when you're cornered, of course. I let the grin smirk and talk back. But we aren't cornered now, is that it? You think that it matters? There's a dozen of us, and 2 of you. We will win one way or another, dead or driven off. It means the same to me, he replied before I continued. I think you haven't fought us before when something really mattered to one of us. That's what sets us apart. We bring the corner with us. It's in our minds. We can look at a certainty of defeat and simply say that it's too fucking bad. We're not going to run. We're going to make your victory as painful as possible. I began to look around the crowd. Then my hands pulled free from my pockets. The guns of dead men in my hands. So I say to all of you here, if you fight us now, know that you don't fight people who will run. I could see some of them start to look nervous as my friend slowly drew her blade. They readied their weapons as well. But I wasn't done, though I did let it sink in a bit. Just us in this too bright tea house, surrounded by a soft winter rain. It was peaceful, despite the impending violence. I finally finished what I was saying. You don't fight people who'll do anything to survive. You fight people who can rise above their instincts, who can turn off that voice in their head telling us to flee. You fight people who can stare death in the face and say, I turned to Gren specifically then, looking him in the eyes as he towered over me, I know how to die. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.